Welcome to the 5th devlog for Project Breach. Starting on the AI, the new wandering system was improved in the exact way that I talked about in the last update, and it worked perfectly. Pawns now convincingly wander around, making sure not to drift too far from their starting place. But pawns taking a casual stroll while bullets fly past? Probably not the best idea. So, I implemented a series of different behaviors pawns will engage in depending on the situation. Pawns can now seek and take cover. This may happen because they've been shot, or because they think they might be. Pawns can now also hear gunshots. This was one of the more important changes, as before, if a pawn didn't have line of sight over an enemy, it would never even know they were there, even if all his allies were battling it out in the next room over. Pawns can also decide to forget cover altogether and just charge the enemy. This is used as more of a reinforcement tactic, that while your allies are pinned down, you can afford to run up and go for quick, clean shots on whoever is attacking them. And finally, pawns can investigate. If they've had line of sight or been shot, they know exactly where their attacker is. But if all they heard was a gunshot, they'll only know the general idea of where the attacker might be, but not exactly. If they show up and they find that no one's there, they'll look around for a while before eventually just returning to normal. Comparing this new system with what we had before, you truly get to see how much it changes the gameplay. Only 2 weeks ago, a pawn would just stand there, practically waiting, just begging to be shot. Now, they move about, try to better defend themselves with cover, assist their allies, and work together to hunt down the one who attacked them. At some point, I'd probably like to redo the pawn AI. I've learned so much since first starting on it, and I think it's a little messy, but for the demo, I'm going to leave it how it is. The gadget system was just something I didn't want to do. And in hindsight, I don't really know why. I just had some sort of mental block preventing me from wanting to even start on it. But with the game getting so close to the demo, I finally pulled the trigger to do it. And with most things you put off, it was much easier to do than how you thought it'd be inside your head. I knew in advance what gadgets I'd be making with this system, so I was able to quickly identify the two types, placed and thrown. After that, I began adding two types of functionality, triggers and trigger effects. Triggers were what made the gadget go off. Right now that just means a timer, but in the future it could also mean things like impacting with a wall or being shot. Trigger effects were what happened when the gadget was triggered. I added 3. Damage pawns in a radius, damage mod objects in a radius, and that includes things like walls, and stun pawns in a radius. And with those 3 effects, I was able to make the 3 gadgets that pawns will be using. The first being the breach charge, which would damage pawns and damage mod objects. The second being the HE, or high explosive grenade, which that would just damage pawns. And the third one being the flashbang, which would stun pawns. You can't yet order pawns to use these gadgets, although I'm already working on that, but here's me testing them by spawning them in the editor. And here's one of the big ones. Massive improvements have been made to pawn performance. The main performance draw was that when there were pawns within range of each other, they had to perform a line of sight check. This check can be expensive, so when many pawns are doing it at once, the game, at least on my PC, would drop below 144 FPS at only around 80 pawns. This really annoyed me, because I really want the game to be able to support a lot more than that. I used Unity's built-in Deep Profiler and discovered that I was right. 90% of a pawn's performance drop was because of that line of sight check. So I spent time doing dedicated tests to improve one part of it at a time and measure the change. The result was that only after a few hours of testing, I had managed to massively reduce the performance use of the line of sight check. And how much do I mean by massive? 47% less milliseconds to calculate. That's pretty massive. And I've been considering other changes that might even help it further. While debugging, I also discovered that the pawn's movement script was using up more resources than it should be. It wasn't using up much, 16 pawns took 0.1 milliseconds, but I knew that that number could still be improved. It turned out it was a similar performance problem that was plaguing the line of sight check, only this time it was caused by the system that made so pawns could auto-open doors. After implementing my new solution, 16 pawns only took 0.03 milliseconds to do this check. That's a 97% improvement. I know it's not terribly exciting to talk about performance improvements, but it's really important to me that this game run as well as possible so I can continue to build on top of what I've already written without having to worry that it won't be able to handle it. And of course, so as many people as possible are able to play the game. With only these two changes, the game now wouldn't drop below 144 FPS on my PC until over 170 pawns. That's over double the amount of pawns the engine can now support. Even after that improvement, the line of sight check is still about 80% of a pawn's performance usage, so looking into improving it into the future would be massively beneficial. I didn't quite manage to take my advice last update and take much of a break, but I did manage to take most of Saturday and Sunday off. Especially with Sunday being Easter, I was able to enjoy talking with family, which I don't do as much as I should. I've also really gotten into playing State of Decay 2, so that's helped me not to work all day. Being so close to the demo though, I can see the finish line, and that's giving me massive motivation to keep working and get things done. Whereas before, I was just doing things every day because I felt like I should. Now I'm excited to open up the project and take another step closer to the demo. Quick project extras. The project is now at 22,079 lines of code and 245 scripts. That's an increase of 1,410 lines from the last update and an increase of 9 scripts from the last update. You can see there's a few changes I made to the demo essentials list. For this checklist, I really decided to think harder about what the game really needs for an accurate demo. A lot of what I had listed on there, such as Amazon servers and lobby UI and others, were for multiplayer, which isn't the focus of the game. So I decided to remove them from the list for the demo. This means that the demo is now planned to be a single player experience, since that was the core of the game anyway. I also removed player UI from the list since that's not really necessary either, and instead replaced it with pawn UI, since that'll be necessary for giving some of the orders like use gadget and attack position. I also removed melee weapon from the list. Although I still think the final game will have them, I don't think they're necessary for a demo. I also added pawns can use gadgets to the list, since gadgets do play an important enough of a role in the game for them to be needed in the demo. I added friendly pawn start spawns, since at the moment for testing, I just press space to spawn in a friendly pawn. So for the demo, I'll need to make so friendly pawns can start already on the map. And finally, I removed squad customization from the demo requirements. This was the hardest one for me to debate if it was necessary or not, and although it, like many other things, is important, I don't think having different loadouts is important for testing if the game is fun to play or not, which is what the demo is about. So, with these new demo requirements in mind, I'm optimistic, and I think the game's demo should be ready to release sometime around update number 7 or number 8, although I'm fine with it being sooner or longer than that. I should have the game website ready for you guys by the next update, so you'll be able to sign up for the demo and invite others to sign up as well. And as always, thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.